The lock clicked as I turned my key, but something felt wrong. My suitcase stood forgotten at my feet as I stared at the unfamiliar shoes scattered across my entryway. Men's size 12. My brother's guitar case leaned against my custom-built bookshelf, and the scent of his cologne, the same one he'd worn since high school, hung in the air, replacing the delicate lavender diffuser I'd left running. After building my dream home from nothing but student loans and sheer determination, I returned. From securing the biggest client of my career to find someone else had made himself comfortable in my absence. Not just anyone, my unemployed younger brother who hadn't spoken to me in years. And according to the voicemail from our mother, I had no right to be upset because family must share what they have. What she didn't understand was that I had already shared enough. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The California sunset painted my home office in hues of gold and amber as I reviewed the finalized contract on my laptop screen. The Nakamura Project, $7 million for a complete digital transformation of their North American operations. My largest client yet. A smile tugged at my lips as I electronically signed the document, knowing this single contract would nearly double my company's annual revenue. "Dinner in 5, called a voice from downstairs. Ellie, my assistant-turned-friend, who had insisted on cooking to celebrate my homecoming and the successful business trip. The delicious aroma of her legendary lasagna wafted up the stairs, momentarily distracting me from the document I'd just signed. My home, a modern craftsman nestled in the hills outside San Diego, represented everything I'd fought to achieve over the past decade. Every square foot, from the hand-selected oak floors to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the canyon, stood as testimony to choices I'd made and battles I'd won. At 34, I had built ClearPath Solutions from a solo consulting operation, run from a studio apartment into a boutique technology firm with 15 employees and a client list that now included Nakamura Industries. I closed my laptop and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Not bad for someone whose guidance counselor had once suggested I manage my expectations after reviewing my college applications. The living room still showed subtle signs of the recent invasion. A water ring on my coffee table that hadn't been there before. Slight indentations in my sofa cushions where they'd been sat on by someone heavier than me. 2 weeks had passed since I'd returned from my business trip to find Marcus, my younger brother, had moved in during my absence. 2 weeks of uncomfortable conversations, boundary setting, and navigating the minefield of family expectations versus personal boundaries. 2 weeks of ignoring my mother's daily calls insisting I was being selfish for not wanting to indefinitely house my 30-year-old brother who had, in her words, hit a rough patch. "Earth to Vanessa," Ellie said, appearing in the doorway. Her curly hair was pulled into a messy bun, and a splash of tomato sauce decorated the front of her apron. "Food's ready, and you promised no work tonight, remember?" I smiled, pushing away from my desk. "Not work, just savoring the moment. The Nakamura contract is officially signed." Ellie's eyes widened. "That calls for the good wine, then." She turned back toward the kitchen, calling over her shoulder, "The one you've been saving for a special occasion." As I followed her downstairs, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. "Marcus. Hey sis, Mom told me you're celebrating tonight. Mind if I stop by? Promise I won't stay long." I stared at the message, a familiar tension creeping up my spine. 2 weeks ago, I had returned from landing this very contract to find Marcus had moved into my house with our mother's blessing but without my permission. The confrontation that followed had been uncomfortable but necessary, ending with him reluctantly packing his things and moving in with our cousin temporarily. My finger hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to maintain the boundary I'd set. This was my celebration, in my home, after my accomplishment. Marcus had his own path to follow. but another part recognized an opportunity to redefine our relationship on new terms, as adults, with mutual respect rather than the entitlement that had characterized his brief residence in my home. Before I could respond, another message appeared. I get it if it's not a good time. Just wanted to say congratulations. That's a big deal, V. The use of my childhood nickname, V, caught me off guard. It had been years since he'd called me that, back before adult responsibilities and different life choices had driven a wedge between us. Everything okay? Ellie asked, noticing my hesitation at the foot of the stairs. It's Marcus, I replied, still staring at the message. He wants to stop by. Ellie raised an eyebrow. She had been there during the aftermath of finding Marcus in my house, had witnessed the heated phone call with my mother where I'd been told I was abandoning family by insisting Marcus find his own place. What are you going to say? I took a deep breath. I think I'm going to say yes, but on my terms this time. I typed a quick response. You can join us for dinner, 7 p.m., not staying over. His reply was immediate. Understood. Thanks, V. See you at 7. As I set the phone down and helped Ellie finish setting the table, my mind drifted back to how this journey had begun. Not with the confrontation 2 weeks ago, but years earlier, when I had found myself at a professional crossroads much like the one Marcus was facing now. The difference was, no one had handed me keys to a fully furnished house when I was struggling. No one had insisted that family members owed me a place to stay indefinitely. Instead, I had learned the hard but valuable lesson that genuine success comes from building something yourself, not moving into what someone else has built. The doorbell rang precisely at 7, and I felt a sudden appreciation for this small sign of respect, Marcus being punctual, honoring the boundary I'd set. It was a minor thing, perhaps, but it represented the beginning of a new understanding between us. As I moved to answer the door, I caught a glimpse of myself in the entryway mirror, confident, established, successful. I barely resembled the desperate young woman who had once slept on friends' couches while building her business from nothing, who had eaten ramen for weeks to make rent while competing for her first clients. That journey, from struggling freelancer to company founder, from apartment hopper to homeowner, had shaped not just my career, but my core beliefs about self-reliance, personal boundaries, and the true meaning of helping others. It had taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is not to give them what they ask for, but to show them what they're capable of achieving themselves. I opened the door to find Marcus standing there, a bottle of wine in one hand and an expression that mixed awkwardness with something I hadn't seen from him in years: respect. Congratulations on the Nakamura deal, he said, extending the wine. I remembered you like reds. Thank you, I replied, accepting both the gift and the olive branch it represented. Come in. We have a lot to talk about. And we did. About boundaries and support, about the difference between helping and enabling, about what family really means when childhood is long past. But more importantly, I had a story to tell him, about how sometimes the hardest path is the one that makes you strongest, about how I had built everything I now had from nothing but determination and unwillingness to settle. It was a story that began 5 years ago, when I had lost everything and discovered that rock bottom can become a foundation if you're brave enough to start building. 5 years earlier, the rain pounded mercilessly against the windows of the downtown office building. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat across from Howard Bennett, my expression carefully neutral despite the devastation coursing through me. I'm sorry, Vanessa, Howard said, unable to meet my eyes as he slid the manila folder across his immaculate desk. We've valued your contributions over the past 3 years, but with the merger, we simply can't justify maintaining redundant position. The folder contained my severance package, 2 months' salary and a form letter thanking me for my service to Bennett and Whitman Technologies. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, canceled vacations, and postponed personal life reduced to a corporate template and a check that wouldn't even cover my rent and car payment through summer. Redundant, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. And Thomas? Thomas Reynolds was my counterpart in the company being acquired, less experienced, less qualified, but the CEO's nephew. Howard had the decency to look uncomfortable. Thomas will be overseeing the consolidated department. Of course he would. I nodded, gathering the folder and my dignity. I assume this is effective immediately. HR will supervise while you collect your personal belongings. Howard finally looked up. For what it's worth, this wasn't my decision. If it had been purely merit-based, but it wasn't, I finished for him. Thank you for the opportunity, Howard. Professional to the end, I extended my hand, which he shook with visible relief at my composure. That composure lasted precisely until I reached my car in the parking garage, a 2012 Audi I'd purchased 6 months earlier to celebrate my promotion to Senior Solutions Architect. The promotion that had come with a substantial raise. The raise that had convinced me it was finally safe to sign a lease on my dream apartment overlooking the bay. The rain matched my tears as I gripped the steering wheel, allowing myself exactly 5 minutes of breakdown before straightening my shoulders. 5 minutes to mourn the death of the future I'd planned. 5 minutes to acknowledge the unfairness. 5 minutes, and not a second more, to feel sorry for myself. When those 5 minutes ended, I dried my eyes, started the engine, and called the one person who might understand. My father had built his construction company from nothing, weathering economic downturns, unscrupulous competitors, and his own battle with cancer that had nearly bankrupted the family when I was in high school. If anyone knew about professional setbacks and comebacks, it was William Hayes. He listened silently as I explained the situation, waiting until I'd finished before speaking. "Are you calling to vent or to plan?" he asked finally, his voice gruff but kind. "To plan," I replied without hesitation. "I can't change what happened, but I need to figure out what's next." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Good," he said simply, "because what they took from you was a job, not your skills, not your knowledge, and certainly not your worth. Remember that." By the time I reached my apartment, I had the outline of a plan. I'd been specializing in digital transformation solutions for mid-sized companies, helping businesses modernize their operations through technology. With my severance and savings, I had roughly 4 months before financial disaster, assuming I maintained my current lifestyle. But what if I didn't maintain it? That night, I sat cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by spreadsheets and calculations. My apartment lease had 8 months remaining at $2,900 per month. Breaking it would cost an additional 2 months' rent, nearly $6,000 I couldn't afford to lose. My car payment was $490 monthly. Insurance, utilities, student loan payments, and basic living expenses added up to a burn rate that would exhaust my resources well before I could reasonably expect to find another position, especially in a market now flooded with redundant employees from the merger. I made 3 immediate decisions. First, I would post my apartment on a sublease website tomorrow. Second, I would sell the Audi and buy something practical and paid for with the equity. Third, I would take the skills I'd been using to make my employer millions and find a way to make myself hundreds, at least enough to survive until I could rebuild. The next morning, I canceled my membership at the waterfront yoga studio, returned the barely worn designer blazer I'd purchased the previous week, and called my younger brother. "Marcus, I need a favor. Can I crash at your place for a few weeks while I figure some things out?" Marcus, then 25 and working as a bartender while trying to launch his music career, lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate. His surprise was evident. "You want to stay here? What happened to the fancy apartment with the bay view?" I swallowed my pride. "I got laid off yesterday. I need to sublease my place and reduce expenses until I can find another position." "Whoa, that's rough," he said, genuine concern in his voice. "Yeah, of course you can stay. The couch is yours for as long as you need." Relief flooded through me. "Thanks, Marcus. I promise it won't be long." "No worries. Hey, maybe you can help me build a website for my band while you're here," he added lightly. "Put those tech skills to use." I laughed despite everything. Deal. What I didn't tell Marcus, what I couldn't bring myself to admit aloud, was the depth of my financial precariousness. The student loans for my master's degree in information systems, the credit card debt accumulated during 3 unpaid internships, the car loan I'd taken on with such optimism. Together, they created a financial house of cards that had just collapsed spectacularly. 2 days later, my apartment was listed for sublease, and I'd accepted an offer on my Audi that would leave me with enough to purchase a used Honda Civic and about $3,000 in emergency funds. I packed 2 suitcases with essentials, placed everything else in storage, and moved onto my brother's lumpy couch in North Park, a far cry from my luxury high-rise downtown. The call to our mother was the hardest. "Laid off?" Patricia Hayes's voice carried equal measures of concern and disapproval. "But I thought you were doing so well. Didn't you just get a promotion?" "I was, and I did," I confirmed, pacing the length of Marcus's small balcony while my brother was at work. "But the company was acquired, and my position was eliminated." "Well, I'm sure you'll find something quickly. With your experience—" "Mom, I'm staying at Marcus's for now," I interrupted, needing to get the words out. I had to sublease my apartment and sell my car. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, she said, "Oh, Vanessa, if you needed help, why didn't you call us first? Your father and I could have—" "I don't need financial help," I said firmly, even as my bank account balance mocked me. "I need time to figure out my next steps, that's all." Marcus had space, so it made sense. "Well, if you're sure." Her tone made it clear she wasn't convinced. "But promise you'll let us know if things get worse. Family is there to help each other through hard times." The irony of that statement would become painfully apparent years later, when the same philosophy was wielded against me under very different circumstances. As it turned out, finding another corporate position in my field proved even more challenging than anticipated. The merger that had cost me my job had created ripple effects throughout the industry, with several companies implementing hiring freezes until the market stabilized. My network, while strong, was filled with people facing similar uncertainty about their own positions. 3 weeks of rejections and unreturned calls forced me to confront an uncomfortable truth. Waiting for the perfect opportunity might mean waiting too long. I needed income, now, and that meant expanding my search beyond the comfortable corporate roles I'd been pursuing. One evening, as I helped Marcus build that promised website for his band, an idea began to form. Throughout my corporate career, I'd accumulated expertise in streamlining business operations through technology integration, skills that could potentially translate to freelance consulting work for smaller businesses that couldn't afford full-time IT staff or expensive consulting firms. "You know," Marcus observed as we uploaded photos of his bandmates to the site, "you're really good at this. Like, scary good. You made this whole thing in what, 3 hours?" I shrugged. "It's pretty basic. Nothing compared to the enterprise systems I was implementing." "Maybe not," he agreed. "But I bet there are tons of small businesses around here that would pay good money for even basic websites and tech help." His words echoed my own thoughts. "You think?" "Absolutely. My boss at the bar was just complaining last week about how much the restaurant management software sucks. Said he'd pay anything for a system that actually worked for a place our size instead of something designed for national chains." That conversation catalyzed what would become ClearPath Solutions. That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m. creating a business plan, researching potential client bases, and developing service packages tailored to small and medium businesses that were underserved by existing technology providers. By morning, I had a clear vision and a growing sense of purpose that had been absent since the layoff. Instead of trying to re-enter corporate America, I would create something of my own, something that couldn't be taken away by a merger or a CEO's nephew. The path forward wasn't immediately smooth. My first client, indeed, Marcus's bar, owner, paid me $500 to optimize their point-of-sale system and create a simple inventory management solution. The project took 40 hours, meaning I'd worked for $12, $50 per hour, less than I could have made waiting tables. But it gave me something more valuable than money: a success story and a reference. One client became 3, then 5, then a steady stream of small businesses referred by satisfied customers. I worked from coffee shops, client offices, and Marcus's living room, taking on projects ranging from website development to complete digital workflow redesigns. My corporate experience gave me credibility, while my desperate financial situation gave me hunger and hustle that my competition lacked. 4 months after moving onto Marcus's couch, I had enough consistent income to rent a small studio apartment. 6 months after that, I hired my first contractor to help with overflow work. By the 1-year anniversary of my layoff, ClearPath Solutions was generating more revenue than my corporate salary had provided, though admittedly with less security and no benefits. The irony wasn't lost on me that losing everything had ultimately led to building something far more valuable than what I'd had before. Not just financially, but in terms of freedom, purpose, and resilience. Every challenge I overcame, from late-paying clients to technical emergencies, reinforced the knowledge that I could survive adversity and emerge stronger. What I couldn't have anticipated was how this hard-won independence would eventually become the battleground for a family conflict that would test not just my business acumen, but my personal boundaries and sense of self-worth in ways the corporate layoff never had. ClearPath Solutions' second year brought both growth and growing pains. While client referrals continued to increase, I found myself facing the classic entrepreneur's dilemma. I had become the bottleneck in my own business. Every new project required my personal attention. Every client expected direct contact with the owner, and every technical challenge landed ultimately on my desk. By this point, I had moved from the small studio apartment to a modest 2-bedroom rental that served as both living space and office. My dining room table had become command central, covered in laptops, monitors, and the ever-present coffee, cups that fueled 18-hour workdays. It was on one particularly grueling Tuesday, after completing an emergency server migration at 2 a.m. and waking at 6 a.m. for a client call, that I realized something had to change. I couldn't continue as both the visionary and the primary worker in the business. Either ClearPath would evolve, or I would burn out trying to maintain an unsustainable model. The universe, apparently agreeing with this assessment, chose that precise moment to deliver a critical turning point disguised as disaster. My phone rang just as I was preparing for a crucial presentation with a potential client who could double my monthly revenue. The caller ID showed Jordan Chen, my largest client and the source of nearly 30% of ClearPath's current income. "Jordan, can I call you back in an hour? I'm just heading into a meeting." "Vanessa, we have a situation." Jordan's normally calm voice carried an edge of panic. "Our entire system is down. Point of sale, inventory, customer records, everything. We can't process a single transaction." My stomach dropped. Jordan's family-owned restaurant supply business served hundreds of establishments across Southern California. A complete system failure meant potentially thousands of dollars in lost revenue every hour. "I'll reschedule my meeting and head over right away." "Thank you. We're dead in the water here." I called the prospective client, manufactured an emergency, and rescheduled for the following week, hoping I hadn't just lost a major opportunity. 20 minutes later, I arrived at Chen Restaurant Supply's warehouse to find barely controlled chaos. Phone lines were ringing constantly with customers unable to place orders through the website. Staff were writing orders by hand. The accounting team couldn't access any financial records. And Jordan's father, the 68-year-old founder who had reluctantly agreed to digitize the business 2 years earlier, was loudly proclaiming that this wouldn't have happened with paper ledgers. For the next 14 hours, I worked to identify and resolve the issue. A corrupted database combined with a failed backup system. By midnight, I had restored core functionality. By 4 a.m., the entire system was operational again. And by 8 a.m., exhausted and running entirely on caffeine, I presented Jordan with recommendations to prevent similar failures in the future. We need to implement redundant backup systems, cloud-based failover protocols, and regular integrity testing, I concluded, fighting to keep my eyes open. What happened yesterday was preventable with the right infrastructure. Jordan nodded, equally exhausted but relieved. Whatever it takes. Yesterday cost us over $50,000 in delayed orders and overtime. I can't let that happen again. I hesitated, then pushed forward with the realization that had crystallized during the overnight crisis. Jordan, what you need isn't just better systems. You need ongoing support and monitoring, not just emergency response, but prevention. Isn't that what we're paying you for? You're paying me for project-based work and emergency assistance. But what you actually need is a technology partner, someone consistently monitoring your systems, implementing upgrades, and ensuring business continuity. Jordan studied me thoughtfully. You're talking about a retainer arrangement instead of project fees. Exactly. A fixed monthly investment that covers both maintenance and development. It would actually cost you less than emergency responses in the long run, while providing greater stability. And you'd be available whenever we need you? This was the crux of my dilemma. Not me personally, no. I'd need to build a team to provide that level of service. I would oversee everything and remain your primary contact, but I'd have specialists handling different aspects of your technology needs. Jordan didn't immediately respond, and I feared I'd overreached. After all, our relationship had always been based on my personal expertise. Asking him to accept service from a team I hadn't even hired yet felt dangerously presumptuous. Finally, he smiled. I think I understand what you're really saying, Vanessa. You've outgrown being a one-woman show. His perception startled me. I suppose I have. My father faced the same challenge 20 years ago, Jordan continued. He had to decide whether Chen Supply would remain a small business where he personally selected every product, or whether it would grow into something larger that operated even when he took a day off. He extended his hand. Send me a proposal for this retainer arrangement. Include details about the team you'll build and the services you'll provide. If it makes sense for us, ClearPath will be our technology department, not just our emergency contact. That conversation became the catalyst for ClearPath's transformation. Over the next week, I created a comprehensive proposal for Chen Restaurant Supply that outlined a new business model, one built around ongoing partnerships rather than isolated projects. The model required building a team with specialized skills, establishing standardized processes, and creating systems that didn't rely exclusively on my personal attention. Jordan accepted the proposal, becoming ClearPath's first retainer client. The guaranteed monthly revenue gave me the financial stability to begin recruiting the team I needed, starting with a network administrator who could handle the technical. Monitoring that had kept me tethered to my laptop at all hours. My first hire was Elena Rodriguez, a brilliant systems engineer I'd met during my corporate days. She had recently been downsized from her own position and was considering relocating for a new opportunity. I'm not offering corporate benefits or stability, I warned during our coffee meeting. ClearPath is growing, but it's still essentially a startup. The hours can be unpredictable, and I'm learning to be a manager as I go. Elena stirred her latte thoughtfully. Tell me something, Vanessa. When you were laid off, did you ever imagine you'd be sitting here 2 years later preparing to hire your first employee? Honestly? No, I was just trying to survive. And yet here you are, building something from nothing. She smiled. That's exactly the kind of journey I want to be part of. Corporate America already showed me the door once. I'd rather help build something new than wait for the next round of layoffs. With Elena handling technical operations, I could focus on business development and client relationships. Within 3 months, we converted 5 more project clients to retainer agreements. Within 6 months, we hired a web developer and a part-time administrative assistant. By the end of that pivotal year, ClearPath had 7 employees and a dedicated office space in a converted industrial building downtown. The transition from solo entrepreneur to business leader wasn't seamless. I made hiring mistakes, underestimated project timelines, and occasionally found myself working through weekends to deliver on promises my team couldn't yet fulfill. There were moments I questioned whether growth was worth the increased responsibility and stress, whether I should have remained a skilled individual contributor rather than attempting to build something larger. During one particularly challenging week, when a key employee quit unexpectedly and 2 major projects faced simultaneous delays, I called my father in a rare moment of self-doubt. I don't know if I can do this, Dad, I admitted, pacing the empty office after everyone else had gone home. Maybe I'm not cut out to run a company. Maybe I should scale back to what I can handle myself. You could do that, he acknowledged. But remember why you started ClearPath in the first place. Was it just to create a job for yourself? Or was it to build something meaningful? The question cut through my fatigue and frustration. Something meaningful, I answered without hesitation. Then growing pains are part of the journey. When I expanded Hayes Construction beyond just me and a couple of workers, I made plenty of mistakes. Hired the wrong people, took on projects we weren't ready for, but I learned from each setback. How did you know it was worth it? I asked. Because building something larger than yourself creates opportunities not just for you, but for everyone who joins you on the journey. Every person you employ can support their family, because you had the courage to grow beyond what was comfortable. His perspective realigned my thinking. ClearPath wasn't just my livelihood. It had become the source of income for 7 other people and the technology partner for dozens of businesses who relied on our services. The responsibility was heavy, but so was the potential impact. The following morning, I arrived early and mapped out a revised organizational structure on the office whiteboard, one that distributed responsibilities more effectively and created clear paths for advancement as the company grew. When my team arrived, I shared both my vision for ClearPath's future and my acknowledgement of the growing pains we were experiencing. I don't have all the answers, I concluded honestly. But I'm committed to building something we can all be proud of, and I need your help to do it. That transparent conversation marked another turning point. Instead of trying to maintain the illusion of perfect leadership, I invited my team into the real challenges of building a business. Their response was immediate and powerful, not just acceptance, but genuine engagement with finding solutions to our shared challenges. Elena stepped up to develop improved project management processes. Our web developer created internal tools to streamline our workflow. Even our part-time administrator identified inefficiencies in our invoicing system that were causing cash flow delays. By giving them ownership in ClearPath's evolution, I transformed potential flight risks into invested partners. The company culture shifted from Vanessa's business to our company, a change that would prove crucial to navigating the challenges ahead. What I couldn't have anticipated was how this professional transformation would eventually intersect with personal boundaries in ways that would test not just my leadership skills, but my fundamental beliefs about obligation, success, and family responsibility. As ClearPath stabilized and grew, I allowed myself the first real measure of personal comfort since the layoff. I moved from the combination apartment office to a proper rental house with a small yard and separation between work and home life. I replaced the used Honda Civic with a modest but new Subaru. Small luxuries returned, occasional restaurant meals, a weekend yoga class, new clothes that weren't purchased strictly for client meetings. These modest improvements in my circumstances represented hard-won success after years of sacrifice. What I didn't realize was that others were observing these changes through very different lenses, including family members who would eventually view my independence not as achievement to be respected, but as resources to be shared. 3 years. After launching ClearPath Solutions, I faced a different kind of challenge. The company had grown to 15 employees occupying a full floor in a downtown office building. Our client roster included over 40 businesses on retainer agreements, and we had developed specialized service packages for different industries. What had begun as emergency survival following my layoff had evolved into a thriving business, generating over $2 million in annual revenue. With this growth came a new set of demands on my role as founder and CEO. No longer was technical expertise my primary value. Instead, leadership, strategic vision, and relationship management had become my most crucial contributions. This transition required developing skills I'd never needed in my corporate career: delegation, team building, financial forecasting, and perhaps most challengingly, learning to step back from the work I knew best. "You need to stop coding," Elena told me bluntly during a quarterly planning meeting. As ClearPath's first employee and now our chief technology officer, she had earned the right to direct honesty. "Every time you jump in to help with implementation, you create bottlenecks. The team waits for your input instead of developing their own solutions." I knew she was right, but the adjustment proved difficult. Having built my identity around technical problem-solving, surrendering that aspect of the work felt like abandoning a core part of myself. Yet leading effectively meant empowering others rather than demonstrating my own capabilities. The turning point came during a critical project for our largest client to date, a regional healthcare provider implementing a custom patient management system. Our team had developed an elegant solution, but as the implementation deadline approached, unexpected integration issues emerged. My instinct was to dive in personally, working late nights to diagnose and resolve the technical problems. Instead, following Elena's advice, I took a different approach. I gathered our development team, clearly articulated the challenges and constraints, then asked a simple question: "How would you solve this?" What followed was remarkable. Junior developers who had previously remained quiet in meetings offered innovative approaches. Team members built on each other's ideas, identifying solutions I wouldn't have considered. By stepping back, I created space for collective intelligence that surpassed my individual capabilities. The project was delivered successfully, on time, and with technical solutions superior to what I would have implemented alone. More importantly, the team's confidence and cohesion strengthened immeasurably. They had solved a significant challenge, without depending on my technical intervention. This experience taught me the profound difference between being needed and being valuable. Being needed created dependency and limited growth, both for the organization and for individual team members. Being valuable meant contributing in ways that empowered others and expanded our collective capabilities. This principle extended beyond technical work to all aspects of ClearPath's operations. I learned to hire people smarter than myself in specialized areas, to trust their expertise, and to focus my energy on the strategic questions only the founder could address. What direction should the company take? Which opportunities aligned with our core mission? How could we maintain our values while continuing to grow? These leadership lessons proved invaluable not just for ClearPath's development, but for my personal growth as well. The skills I was developing, clear boundary setting, strategic prioritization, and empowering others through delegation, would eventually become crucial in navigating the family dynamics that threatened to undermine all I had built. As ClearPath stabilized in its growth phase, I finally allowed myself to consider a goal that had seemed impossibly distant during the desperate days following my layoff: homeownership. Not just any property, but a home that represented both achievement and aspiration, a place designed specifically for my needs and preferences after years of adapting to spaces designed for others. The search took nearly 6 months. Working with a patient realtor, I explored dozens of properties throughout San Diego County, seeking the right combination of location, layout, and potential. Eventually, I found it, a mid-century modern home in the hills that needed significant renovation but offered stunning views and the structural elements I had envisioned. The purchase itself represented a significant milestone. The down payment came entirely from ClearPath's profits, tangible evidence of transforming professional disaster into sustainable success. The mortgage approval process, reviewing my business financials and personal credit history, validated the financial discipline I had maintained throughout the company's growth. "Congratulations," my father said when I called to share the news. "You've done what most people never manage, built something from nothing that's truly yours." The renovation process became another exercise in leadership and vision. Working with an architect and contractors, I applied the same strategic thinking that had built ClearPath to transforming the dated property into a modern, functional home that reflected my values and lifestyle. I chose sustainable materials, prioritized natural light and connection to the surrounding landscape, and designed multi-purpose spaces that could adapt to different needs, including a dedicated home office for the inevitable weekend work sessions. Every decision balanced immediate desires with long-term value, just as I'd learned to do in business planning. 6 months of construction transformed the property from a dated relic to a contemporary sanctuary. The final result, with its open floor plan, walls of glass overlooking the canyon, and seamless indoor-outdoor living spaces, represented not just a place to live, but a physical manifestation of the journey from corporate cast-off to successful entrepreneur. The housewarming party brought together ClearPath's leadership team, close friends, and family members. As guests explored the thoughtfully designed spaces, their reactions ranged from admiration to something approaching awe. "I can't believe this is yours," Marcus commented, standing on the back deck overlooking the sunset. In the years since I'd crashed on his couch, my brother's own path had taken several turns. His band had achieved modest regional success, but nothing approaching financial stability. He'd cycled through various day jobs, bartending, retail, management, even a brief stint in real estate that hadn't panned out. "Sometimes I can't believe it either," I admitted. There were moments I thought I'd never recover from the layoff, let alone build something like this. "You always were the determined one," he said, his tone carrying a complexity I couldn't quite decipher. Pride mixed with something else. Envy? Regret? "Even when we were kids, once you decided to do something, nothing could stop you." "It wasn't just determination," I replied, wanting him to understand. "It was necessity. I didn't have a safety net when I lost my job. There was no trust fund, no spouse with a stable income, no option to move back home. I had to make it work or lose everything." Marcus nodded, though I wasn't certain he truly comprehended the desperate edge that had driven my early entrepreneurial efforts. His life had followed a different pattern, periods of focused ambition interrupted by comfortable plateaus, with family support cushioning the transitions. "Well, you definitely made it work." He gestured toward the house. "This place is incredible. You should be proud." Later that evening, as the party wound down, my mother pulled me aside, her expression serious beneath her social smile. "Vanessa, I need to talk to you about your brother." My guard immediately rose. Throughout my adult life, conversations that began this way typically led to requests for assistance, sometimes financial, sometimes practical, always positioned as sisterly obligation rather than choice. What about him? He's struggling. Right now. The band isn't bringing in much money, and he just lost his apartment. The new owners doubled the rent with barely a month's notice. I nodded, genuinely sympathetic to the housing challenges facing many in San Diego's inflated market. That's tough. Has he found a new place? That's what I wanted to discuss. With you. She glanced meaningfully around the spacious living room. You have all this space now, and he needs somewhere to stay while he gets back on his feet. The request, though not entirely unexpected, still caught me off guard. After years of building my business and finally creating a home that reflected my needs and preferences, the suggestion that I should immediately share it felt presumptuous at best. Mom, I just moved in myself. I'm still settling in and figuring out how the space works for me. It's a 3-bedroom house, Vanessa. Surely you don't need all that space for just yourself. Her tone carried the unmistakable note of maternal guilt induction, a strategy that had proven effective throughout my childhood, but had gradually lost power as I'd built an independent, adult life. The 2nd bedroom is my home office, I explained, maintaining an even tone. I still work from home frequently, especially on weekends, and the 3rd bedroom is set up as a guest room, not a permanent living space. Family should come before work, she countered, the lines around her mouth tightening. Marcus helped you when you needed a place to stay. Have you forgotten that? Of course not, and I'm happy to help Marcus find a new apartment, maybe even assist with the security deposit. But having him move in here isn't the right solution. My mother's expression hardened slightly. I don't understand why you're being so selfish about this. You have more than enough, and your brother needs help. That's what family does. We share what we have. The conversation ended without resolution, my mother clearly disappointed by my resistance, and I unsettled by the implication that my success somehow obligated me to provide housing for adult family members. Though I didn't recognize it then, this exchange foreshadowed the more significant confrontation that would follow years later, testing not just my generosity, but my fundamental boundaries. In the months following the housewarming, I focused on 2 parallel tracks of development, continuing ClearPath's strategic growth while creating the personal life that had been deferred during the company's intensive building phase. I joined a hiking group, resumed regular yoga practice, and even cautiously began dating after years of putting relationships on hold. Marcus eventually found a new apartment with a roommate, and the immediate housing crisis passed without requiring my intervention. Our relationship maintained its familiar pattern of holiday gatherings and occasional text exchanges, neither particularly close nor overtly strained. What I failed to recognize during this period of relative calm was that beneath the surface, attitudes were forming that would eventually challenge everything I had built. My visible success, the home, the growing business, the gradually improving lifestyle, was being interpreted not as the hard-earned rewards of risk and sacrifice, but as resources that should naturally be available to family members in need. This perspective would remain dormant until circumstances aligned to bring it forcefully to the surface, testing not just my generosity but my fundamental right to maintain boundaries around what I had created through years of determined effort and strategic growth. As ClearPath Solutions entered its 4th year, I found myself positioned at a critical inflection point. What had begun as a desperate freelance operation had evolved into a respected technology consultancy, with a growing reputation for delivering customized solutions to small and medium businesses. Our team of 20 employees now occupied an expanded office space downtown, and our client roster included companies across Southern California. This success brought both opportunity and responsibility. The opportunity was clear. We could continue our current trajectory, gradually adding clients and team members while maintaining our core services. But after careful reflection, I recognized that this path, while comfortable, might ultimately lead to stagnation. True growth would require strategic vision and calculated risk, qualities that had served me well when launching ClearPath amid the wreckage of my corporate career. On a crisp September morning, I called the leadership team together for an off-site strategy session at a beachfront hotel in La Jolla. Elena Rodriguez, my first hire and now CTO, James Washington, our Director of Client Services, and Sophia Chen, our recently appointed Director of Operations, joined me for what would become a pivotal discussion about ClearPath's future. "We're at a crossroads," I began, gesturing toward the financial projections displayed on the conference room screen. "Our current model has served us well, but we're seeing diminishing returns on new client acquisition in our established market." The data supported this assessment. While we maintained excellent client retention rates, the cost of acquiring new clients in our existing service areas had increased by 37% over the past year. Meanwhile, competitors were beginning to replicate our service model, creating price pressure in what had previously been a specialized niche. "What are our options?" James asked, studying the figures with a furrowed brow. "I see 3 potential paths forward," I replied, activating the next slide. "First, we could expand geographically. Open satellite offices in Los Angeles, San Francisco, maybe even Phoenix or Las Vegas. Second, we could diversify our service offerings to include emerging technologies that our current competitors aren't addressing. Or third, we could develop proprietary solutions that transform us from service providers to product creators." Each option carried distinct implications for ClearPath's future, not just financially, but culturally. Geographic expansion would maintain our existing business model while accessing new markets. Service diversification would require developing expertise in additional technical areas. The product path would fundamentally alter our identity from consultancy to software company. For the next 6 hours, we dissected these options, analyzing market potential, resource requirements, competitive landscapes, and alignment with our core values. The conversation was rigorous and occasionally heated as each leader advocated for their vision of ClearPath's optimal future. Elena, with her deep technical background, saw tremendous potential in developing proprietary solutions. "We've built dozens of custom implementations that share common elements," she argued. "If we extracted those patterns into configurable products, we could serve more clients with less customization while creating intellectual property with significant value." James countered with concerns about client relationships. "Our strength has always been personalized service. Moving toward standardized products risks commoditizing what we offer. Our clients choose us because we solve their specific problems, not because we sell one-size-fits-all solutions." Sophia approached the question from an operational perspective. "Geographic expansion leverages our existing processes while accessing new markets. It's the most straightforward growth path, though not necessarily the most innovative." As the discussion continued, I found myself returning to the fundamental question that had guided ClearPath from its inception. How could we create the most value for our clients, our team members, and ultimately ourselves? The answer, I realized, didn't lie in choosing one path at the expense of the others, but in strategic integration. "What if we're thinking too linearly?" I suggested as the afternoon light shifted across the conference room. "Perhaps these aren't mutually exclusive options." I moved to the whiteboard and began sketching a new model, one that combined elements of all 3 approaches into an integrated strategy. What if we develop proprietary frameworks that accelerate custom implementations? Not full products that eliminate customization, but structured solutions that make customization more efficient? The energy in the room shifted as my colleagues engaged with this hybrid approach. Over the next 2 hours, we refined the concept into a strategic initiative we called Accelerated Custom Solutions, proprietary frameworks that would streamline implementation while preserving the personalization our clients valued. This approach would allow geographic expansion without proportional staffing increases, since our delivery would become more efficient. It would leverage our existing expertise while creating valuable intellectual property. Most importantly, it would maintain our identity as problem solvers rather than product pushers, preserving the culture that had attracted our talented team in the first place. By evening, we had outlined a 3-year strategic plan that would transform ClearPath while honoring its foundations. The vision energized all of us, not just because of its growth potential, but because it represented evolution rather than revolution, building on our strengths instead of abandoning them. As we concluded the session, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the team that had helped shape this vision. 4 years earlier, I had sat alone at my dining room table, desperately trying to generate enough freelance work to survive after a devastating layoff. Now, I led a thriving company with talented leaders who brought perspectives and insights I couldn't have developed alone. The implementation of our new strategy began immediately upon returning to the office. Elena assembled a technical team dedicated to extracting common patterns from our previous implementations and developing the frameworks that would accelerate future projects. James engaged key clients to validate our approach and identify additional opportunities for standardization. Sophia redesigned our operational processes to support both custom solutions and repeatable implementations. My role focused on communicating this vision to our existing team members, to potential clients, and to the technology community more broadly. I developed a thought leadership platform through speaking engagements, industry publications, and strategic networking that positioned ClearPath as innovators in business technology integration. 3 months into this initiative, we landed our first major client under the new model, a regional bank seeking to modernize its small business lending processes. Leveraging our newly developed frameworks, we delivered a solution in 8 weeks that would previously have required 12 to 14, while maintaining the customization that addressed their specific regulatory and competitive requirements. The success of this implementation validated our strategic direction and accelerated our momentum. Within 6 months, we had opened a satellite office in Los Angeles, staffed by a small, efficient team supported by our San Diego-based framework developers. 9 months in, our implementation efficiency had improved by 42%, allowing us to serve more clients with our existing team while maintaining quality standards. The business impact was significant. Revenue increased by 67% year over year, while costs grew at just 35%, creating healthy profit margins that we reinvested in further development of our proprietary frameworks. Our team expanded to 35 members, including specialized roles, focused on framework development and implementation methodology. Beyond the financial results, I witnessed a profound cultural transformation. Team members who had previously executed standard implementations now contributed to evolving our frameworks, finding creative ways to balance standardization with flexibility. This blend of engineering discipline and creative problem-solving attracted additional talent, including experienced developers from larger technology companies seeking more meaningful work. The success of our strategic pivot attracted attention beyond our client base. Industry publications featured ClearPath as an emerging leader in business technology integration. Competitors began attempting to replicate our approach, though without the accumulated knowledge embedded in our frameworks. Most significantly, we received acquisition inquiries from larger consulting firms looking to absorb our methodology and client relationships. These expressions of interest forced me to consider ClearPath's ultimate trajectory. The potential financial rewards of acquisition were substantial, enough to provide lifetime security and the freedom to pursue whatever came next. Yet the company had become more than a business asset. It represented a vision of technology, serving human needs, of solutions designed for actual business requirements rather than technical elegance alone. After careful consideration and discussions with our leadership team, I declined the acquisition offers. Instead, we developed a long-term independent strategy focused on sustainable growth, continuing innovation, and expanded impact. This decision wasn't purely emotional. Our financial projections showed greater long-term value in maintaining independence than in immediate acquisition, but it did reflect the deeper purpose that had emerged through ClearPath's evolution. This period of strategic transformation coincided with personal evolution as well. The demands of leading a growing company had previously left little room for life beyond work. Now, with a strong leadership team and more efficient operations, I could finally create space for personal development and relationships. I renovated the home office in my hillside house, creating a space that balanced functionality with tranquility. Large windows overlooked the canyon, providing perspective during strategic thinking sessions. A separate entrance allowed team members to join me for occasional working sessions without intruding on my living space. This thoughtful separation between professional and personal domains reflected a broader intention to build a life that integrated work as a component rather than allowing it to consume everything else. I established boundaries around working hours, protected weekends for hiking and social activities, and even began dating seriously for the first time since launching ClearPath. My relationship with David, an environmental engineer I met through a mutual friend, developed gradually over coffee discussions, hiking expeditions, and eventually shared travel. His understanding of the demands facing a business founder, combined with his own professional passion, created a partnership based on mutual respect and shared values rather than dependency or obligation. As ClearPath's new strategic direction gained momentum and my personal life found balance, I experienced a sense of integrated purpose that had been absent during the survival-focused early years of entrepreneurship. The desperate scramble following my layoff had evolved into sustainable success built on clear vision, strategic execution, and authentic values. What I couldn't have anticipated was how this hard-won equilibrium would soon be challenged by family expectations established decades earlier. Expectations that viewed my success not as the result of personal sacrifice and strategic risk-taking, but as a fortunate outcome that should naturally be shared with those who hadn't made similar choices. The confrontation that would eventually test my boundaries remained months away, but the foundation for conflict was being laid through subtle interactions and unstated assumptions about the relationship between individual achievement and family obligation. My mother's earlier suggestion that Marcus should move into my newly purchased home had been just the first expression of a perspective that would eventually manifest in more dramatic form. For the moment, however, ClearPath's strategic transformation and my personal evolution continued in parallel, each reinforcing the other in a virtuous cycle of growth and development. The lessons learned through building a successful business, clear vision, strategic decision-making, and principled leadership were increasingly informing my approach to life beyond work, creating an integrated authenticity that would prove essential in navigating the challenges ahead. 5 years after launching ClearPath Solutions from the ashes of my corporate career, life had fallen into a rhythm of purposeful progress. The company had stabilized with 40 employees across our San Diego headquarters and Los Angeles satellite office. Our proprietary implementation frameworks had transformed our service delivery model, allowing us to serve more clients with greater efficiency while maintaining the customization that differentiated us in the market. My personal life had found similar equilibrium. My relationship with David had deepened into a supportive partnership that respected our individual ambitions while creating shared experiences. My modernized hillside home provided both sanctuary and inspiration, with clear separation between professional and personal spaces. After years of all-consuming focus on survival and then growth, I had finally created a life that felt both successful and sustainable. This hard-won stability was about to face its first significant test, not from market disruption or competitive pressure, but from an unexpected quarter that would challenge my boundaries, values, and sense of obligation in ways business never had. The situation began innocuously enough. My mother called on a Tuesday evening as I was reviewing quarterly projections in my home office, the canyon outside my window fading into twilight as the sun set over the Pacific. "Vanessa," I need to discuss something important, she began, her tone carrying that familiar note of concern that had preceded countless conversations throughout my childhood and adult life. It's about Marcus. I suppressed a sigh, saving my spreadsheet before giving her my full attention. What's going on with him? He's been let go from the music store. Budget cuts, apparently. And with the band's tour canceled after the venue chain went bankrupt, he's in a difficult position financially. This wasn't entirely surprising news. Marcus's employment history had always been characterized by periods of stability, interrupted by sudden changes, sometimes by choice, often by circumstance. At 31, he remained caught between his musical aspirations and the economic realities of supporting himself in an expensive city. That's tough timing, I acknowledged. Has he started looking for something new? He's been applying, but you know how the job market is right now. Nothing has come through yet. She paused before continuing. The real problem is his housing situation. His roommate is moving in with his girlfriend, and Marcus can't afford the apartment alone. He needs to be out by the end of the month. The trajectory of the conversation became clear. Another suggestion that Marcus should move into my home, this time with the added pressure of impending housing insecurity rather than mere convenience. Mom, I understand he's in a difficult spot, but... I know what you're going to say, she interrupted. That you value your privacy, that your home is your sanctuary after building your business. I've heard it before. But Vanessa, this isn't about convenience. He could be homeless in 3 weeks. The exaggeration wasn't subtle. San Diego's housing market was challenging, but Marcus had other options. Short-term rentals, shared housing, even temporarily staying with our parents, whose spare bedroom had remained untouched since we'd both moved out years earlier. That's not going to happen, I countered, keeping my tone measured. There are alternatives between staying in his current apartment and homelessness. Has he considered moving back to your place temporarily while he sorts things out? A weighted silence followed. Your father and I are converting the spare room into a home gym. The equipment has already been ordered. I blinked at this new information. My parents' decision to eliminate their only guest room seemed remarkably convenient timing given Marcus's situation. Besides, my mother continued, at his age, Marcus needs independence, not to move back with his parents. Your place makes so much more sense. You have the extra rooms, you're closer to the music venues where he might find work, and your schedule means you're hardly ever home to be disturbed anyway. Her presumptions about my lifestyle, that my home existed primarily as an occasional resting place between work commitments, revealed how little she understood the boundaries I'd deliberately established to create balance in my life. Mom, I've built my home specifically to support my needs, including the need for personal space and separation between work and life. Having Marcus move in, even temporarily, would fundamentally disrupt that balance. Balance? Her voice took on an edge. Vanessa, we're talking about your brother potentially losing his housing. How can you prioritize your balance over his basic needs? The conversation continued in this vein for another 20 minutes. My mother escalating the emotional stakes while minimizing reasonable alternatives, me attempting to maintain boundaries while offering different forms of support. Eventually, we reached an uncomfortable impasse. I can help Marcus financially while he secures new housing, I offered as a compromise. I could cover a short-term rental for a couple of months, or provide funds for a security deposit and first month's rent when he finds a new place. It's not just about money, my mother responded, disappointment evident in her voice. It's about family supporting each other. When you needed help, Marcus opened his home to you without hesitation. This reference to my brief stay on Marcus's couch following my layoff had become a recurring theme in these conversations. A debt apparently never fully repaid, despite years of informal financial support I'd provided my brother during his periodic employment gaps. I appreciate what Marcus did, I acknowledged. and I'm offering substantial help now. But opening my home indefinitely isn't the right solution. Not for me, and honestly, not for Marcus either. He needs to establish sustainable independence, not temporary reliance on family. The call ended without resolution, my mother clearly unsatisfied with my position, and me unsettled by the interaction. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, staring at the spreadsheets that now seemed trivial compared to the emotional complexity of family expectations. The following morning, I received a text from Marcus himself, the first direct communication about his situation. "Hey, V, Mom probably called you about my situation. Don't worry about it. I'm figuring things out. Not your problem to solve." His message carried a mixture of pride and resignation that I recognized from our shared childhood. Growing up in a household where I had been labeled the responsible one and he the creative one, we had both internalized these identities in ways that continued to shape our adult interactions. My success reinforced the narrative that I was naturally equipped for practical achievement, while his struggles similarly reinforced the story that he was meant for creative fulfillment rather than conventional stability. I responded carefully. "I know you'll land on your feet, but I'd like to help if you're open to it. Let me know if you want to grab coffee and talk options." 3 days passed without response, during which I consulted with David about the situation. Unlike my family, who viewed my success primarily as a resource to be shared, David understood the dedication and sacrifice that had built both ClearPath and my personal stability. "Your mother is creating a false choice," he observed as we hiked through Torrey Pines State Reserve that weekend. "She's positioning this as either you open your home or Marcus faces disaster. But there are many alternatives between those extremes." "Exactly," I agreed, grateful for his perspective. "I'm willing to provide significant help, just not in the specific form she's demanding. The question is why that particular form matters so much to her," David continued. "What does having Marcus live with you accomplish that other support doesn't?" His insight prompted deeper reflection. Perhaps for my mother, the issue wasn't practical support but symbolic integration, a visible demonstration that success within the family remained communal property rather than individual achievement. My resistance to housing Marcus threatened this narrative, suggesting that independence might extend beyond temporary circumstance to fundamental identity. This reflection was interrupted by an unexpected development. The following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after my mother's initial call, I received an email from Marcus with the subject line, "Job Opportunity." The message contained a link to a position with a music education nonprofit in Portland, Oregon. The role combined administrative responsibilities with teaching opportunities, a potential fit for Marcus's skills and interests that offered more stability than his previous positions in retail and service industries. "They want me to interview next week," his message concluded. "Seems promising, but it would mean relocating. Thoughts?" The opportunity represented an intriguing solution, one that would resolve the immediate housing crisis while potentially setting Marcus on a more sustainable path aligned with his musical passion. I responded immediately, expressing enthusiasm about the position and offering to help with relocation costs if he received an offer. His reply came the same evening. "Thanks, V. Interview scheduled for Monday. If it works out, I'll take you up." On the relocation help. Could use a fresh start somewhere new. This development shifted the dynamic considerably. Rather than debating whether Marcus would move into my home, the conversation had pivoted toward supporting his potential independence in a new city. I felt cautiously optimistic about this direction, though experience had taught me that opportunities could dissolve as quickly as they appeared in Marcus's unpredictable career trajectory. My mother's reaction to this news revealed much about her underlying expectations. When I called to update her, her initial response was surprisingly negative. "Portland, that's so far away. Why would he want to leave his band and everything? He's built here?" "Mom, his band isn't currently active, and this position combines stable income with music education. It could be perfect for him. But all his connections are here. she persisted. And what about family? We'd never see him. It's a 2-hour flight, I pointed out, and he'd be building new connections in Portland's music scene, which I've heard is vibrant. Her resistance to a solution that addressed both Marcus's immediate needs and long-term prospects was revealing. The scenario I had positioned as win-win, Marcus finding suitable employment while I provided transitional financial support, somehow failed to satisfy her vision of familial interdependence. Well, she finally conceded, I suppose if he gets the job, that would resolve things. But if it doesn't work out, your spare room would still be the most sensible option while he continues his job search here. This conversation crystallized the underlying tension. The issue wasn't merely Marcus's housing security, but a deeper question about the nature of family obligation and individual boundaries. Was success within a family a collective achievement to be shared according to need, or did it remain primarily individual with support offered through choice rather than obligation? As Marcus prepared for his interview, I reflected on how this situation echoed patterns established throughout our childhood, patterns that had shaped our divergent paths into adulthood. The expectations placed on me as the responsible one had fostered discipline and strategic thinking that served me well as an entrepreneur, while the creative freedom afforded to Marcus had nurtured his musical talents, but perhaps undermined the consistency needed for financial stability. Neither path was inherently superior, but the intersection of these different trajectories created inevitable tension when crisis forced them into contact. My boundary setting wasn't a rejection of family obligation, but an assertion that support should empower independence rather than foster dependence, a principle that had guided ClearPath's client relationships and would similarly guide my personal interactions. The week leading to Marcus's interview became a period of suspended animation, with potential futures hanging in balance. I found myself genuinely hoping he would secure the position, not just to resolve the immediate housing dilemma, but because it seemed to offer a path aligned with both his talents and the stability he had struggled to achieve. This experience, though still unfolding, had already provided valuable insight into the complex relationship between professional success and personal boundaries, a relationship that would be tested more dramatically in the confrontation still to come. The Portland opportunity for Marcus ultimately materialized into a formal job offer. The music education nonprofit was impressed by his performance background and teaching experience from the workshops he had occasionally conducted at local schools. The position offered a modest but stable salary, benefits including health insurance, something he had gone without for years, and most importantly, a clear path for growth within an organization that valued his musical talents. When Marcus called to share the news, his voice carried an enthusiasm I hadn't heard from him in years. "They want me to start in 3 weeks," he explained. "I'd be coordinating their after-school program and teaching guitar classes. The director said they might even be able to help me record some original compositions for their curriculum." "That's fantastic," I replied, genuinely pleased for him. "It sounds perfect for your skills." "There's just one challenge," he continued, his tone shifting slightly. "I need to find housing in Portland quickly, and the rental market there is competitive. Plus, I'll need first and last month's rent, security deposit, probably around $4,000 total to get established. With my current situation, I can help with that," I offered without hesitation. "Consider it an investment in your fresh start. No need to pay it back. Just pay it forward someday when you're in a position to help someone else." The relief in his voice was palpable. "Thanks, V. That makes a huge difference." Over the next 2 weeks, I helped Marcus navigate his transition, researching Portland neighborhoods that would balance affordability with proximity to his new workplace, connecting him with a realtor friend who had contacts in the area, and ultimately transferring funds to cover his relocation expenses and initial housing costs. My mother's reaction to this development remained mixed. While she expressed pride in Marcus securing a promising position, she continued to question the necessity of moving so far from family. "I just don't understand why he couldn't find something similar here," she remarked during one of our weekly calls. "Portland is so far away, and with the rainy weather." "This is a perfect opportunity for him, Mom," I countered. "It combines stability with his passion for music, and it gives him the chance to establish himself independently, outside the shadow of his San Diego history." Her sigh carried volumes of unspoken concerns. "I suppose. I just worry about him being so far from family support." "He's 31, I reminded her gently. "Building his own support system is part of adult development, and we're still here for him, just not physically next door." The conversation revealed a fundamental difference in our perspectives on family dynamics. My mother viewed geographic proximity as essential to meaningful support, while I recognized that true independence sometimes required physical distance to develop. In supporting Marcus's relocation rather than housing him in my spare room, I was offering a form of assistance that empowered rather than enabled, a distinction that would prove crucial in the challenges to come. Marcus's departure for Portland temporarily resolved the immediate family tension, allowing me to refocus on ClearPath's continuing evolution and my developing relationship with David. Both fronts were progressing well. The company had secured 3 major new clients using our framework approach, and David and I had begun tentatively discussing cohabitation after nearly a year of dating. This period of relative personal stability coincided with a significant professional opportunity. Nakamura Industries, a Japanese technology conglomerate with growing North American operations, had approached ClearPath about a comprehensive digital transformation project for their Western region. The potential contract, valued at $2.7 million over 18 months, would represent our largest engagement to date, a watershed moment for a company that had begun as a desperate freelance operation just 5 years earlier. The timing was especially meaningful given my personal history. Nakamura was a direct competitor to Bennett & Whitman, the company that had laid me off during the merger that had precipitated my entrepreneurial journey. Securing this contract wouldn't just advance ClearPath's growth. It would represent a symbolic victory over the corporate decision that had once seemed to derail my career. The pursuit of this opportunity became a primary focus. Working closely with our leadership team, I developed a comprehensive proposal that highlighted ClearPath's unique methodology, demonstrating how our framework-accelerated approach would deliver measurable business outcomes more efficiently than traditional consulting models. Elena led a technical proof of concept that showcased our capabilities on a smaller scale, while James orchestrated client testimonials that validated our claims of implementation excellence. After 2 months of intensive effort, including multiple presentations to Nakamura's leadership team across 3 cities, we received word that ClearPath had been selected as their transformation partner. The formal contract negotiations would require my presence in Tokyo for a week-long session at their global headquarters, an unprecedented opportunity that nevertheless presented logistical challenges. "I'll need to leave for Tokyo in 3 weeks, I explained to David during dinner at his coastal apartment. "The timing isn't ideal with the Los Angeles office expansion, but this contract is transformative for ClearPath. I can't delegate the final negotiations." "You shouldn't," he agreed, refilling my wine glass. "This is the culmination of everything you've built. Of course, you should be there personally to close it." His unwavering support highlighted yet again how different our relationship was from my family dynamics. Where my mother saw independence as a form of abandonment, David recognized it as essential to personal fulfillment and growth. His security in our relationship didn't require constant proximity or availability, a maturity that contrasted sharply with family expectations of perpetual accessibility. The preparations for Tokyo consumed the following weeks. Beyond the business aspects, preparing negotiation strategies, developing implementation timelines, aligning technical specifications, there were practical considerations. I arranged for Elena to oversee critical projects during my absence, worked with Sophia to ensure operational continuity, and prepared comprehensive documentation to support the team through any scenarios that might arise while I was unreachable during long flights and time zone differences. On the personal front, I asked David to check on my house periodically, watering plants, collecting mail, and ensuring security during my absence. He readily agreed, suggesting he might use my kitchen to prepare a welcome home dinner for my return. This level of mutual support and respect reflected the healthy partnership we had built, one based on reciprocity rather than obligation. What neither of us anticipated was the crisis that would emerge during my absence, a situation that would test not just my personal boundaries, but ClearPath's operational resilience and leadership depth. The Tokyo trip began smoothly. The 15-hour flight gave me valuable preparation time, reviewing negotiation points and visualizing successful outcomes. Upon arrival, I was greeted by Nakamura's executive team and escorted to accommodations in a sleek hotel overlooking the Imperial Gardens. The contrast between this experience and my desperate job search 5 years earlier wasn't lost on me, a tangible reminder of how far determination and strategic vision had carried me from those uncertain days. The negotiations themselves were intense but productive. Nakamura's leadership appreciated ClearPath's innovative approach, particularly our commitment to embedding knowledge transfer within the implementation process. Rather than creating dependency, we emphasized building their internal capabilities alongside our technical solutions, a philosophy that aligned with their corporate values. By the third day, we had reached agreement on most critical terms. The contract was taking shape as a true partnership rather than merely a service arrangement, exactly the kind of engagement that exemplified ClearPath's mission. That evening, satisfied with our progress, I returned to my hotel room and checked my messages for the first time that day. Among routine updates from the office and a sweet note from David was a text from my mother that immediately set off internal alarms. Called you several times. Family emergency. Please call as soon as possible. Given the 12-hour time difference, it was early morning in California. I immediately returned her call, concern mounting with each ring. Mom, what's happening? Is everyone okay? Vanessa. Thank goodness, she answered, her voice strained. I've been trying to reach you for hours. I was in negotiations all day. What's going on? Is Dad all right? Your father's fine, she assured me. It's Marcus. He's back in San Diego. This was unexpected news. Back? What happened to the Portland job? It didn't work out, she said vaguely. Something about funding cuts and last hired, first fired. He's been let go after just 6 weeks. My heart sank for my brother. Despite my reservations about his employment history, I had genuinely hoped this opportunity would provide the stability he needed. That's terrible timing. Is he staying with you and Dad while he regroups? A telling pause followed. That's the thing, Vanessa. The home gym conversion is complete. There's no spare room here anymore. And with your house sitting empty while you're in Japan. The implication crystallized immediately. Mom, please tell me Marcus hasn't moved into my house. Another pause, longer this time. He needed somewhere to stay immediately. David has a key for emergencies, and when I explained the situation, he understood this qualified. A wave of disbelief washed over me. You convinced David to let Marcus into my house without asking me? I didn't convince anyone, she replied defensively. I simply explained that family helps family in times of need. David agreed it made sense with you away for 2 weeks and all that empty space going unused. The boundaries I had carefully established were being dismantled from 8,000 miles away, with my boyfriend unwittingly enlisted as an accomplice. The violation felt profound, not just of my physical space, but of my autonomy and the clear limits I had previously communicated. Mom, this isn't okay. I explicitly told you I didn't want Marcus living in my house. You've completely disregarded my wishes and privacy. It's temporary, she insisted. just until you return and can discuss more permanent arrangements. He had nowhere else to go on such short notice. The conversation continued in this circular pattern. My expression of violated boundaries met with appeals to family obligation and crisis management. Eventually, I realized I couldn't effectively address the situation from Tokyo with crucial negotiations still underway. "We'll discuss this when I return," I finally stated. "But to be absolutely clear, this arrangement ends when I get back. I expect Marcus to have alternative housing lined up by then." After ending the call, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, attempting to process what had transpired while maintaining the focus needed for tomorrow's negotiations. The situation represented a perfect storm of competing priorities: professional, opportunity versus personal boundaries, family expectations versus individual autonomy. The irony wasn't lost on me. At the very moment ClearPath was achieving unprecedented success, validating the risks and sacrifices of my entrepreneurial journey, the independence that journey had established was being fundamentally challenged. The house that represented my hard-won stability had been repurposed without consent, transformed from personal sanctuary to family resource based on a unilateral decision justified by emergency. As I prepared for the final days of negotiation, I realized that securing the Nakamura contract was now just the first challenge awaiting resolution. The greater test would come upon my return, establishing not just professional boundaries with a major new client, but personal boundaries within my own family. The Tokyo negotiations would ultimately prove far simpler to navigate than the complex family dynamics awaiting me at home. Dynamics that would force a reckoning not just with Marcus's immediate housing situation, but with the fundamental question of whether success earned through individual sacrifice and risk creates obligations that transcend personal boundaries. The remainder of my Tokyo trip passed in a blur of conflicting priorities. During negotiations with Nakamura's executives, I maintained unwavering focus and professional composure. We finalized contract terms that represented a true win-win partnership, with implementation schedules and knowledge transfer protocols that would serve both organizations' interests. When we signed the final agreement in their boardroom overlooking Tokyo's skyline, the moment should have represented an unalloyed triumph. ClearPath's transformation from survival startup to international business partner was complete. Yet beneath this professional accomplishment, personal concerns simmered. Each night in my hotel room, I exchanged increasingly tense messages with David about the situation at home. His initial explanation revealed how thoroughly my mother had manipulated the circumstances. "Your mom called me panicking," he wrote. "Said Marcus was literally going to be on the street that night. She insisted you'd want to help if you were here, and that she would have offered their place if they had room. I thought it was a 1 or 2 night emergency until they found alternatives. And now," I typed back, "he's settling in, brought quite a bit of stuff, guitar equipment in the living room. Your mom stops by almost daily with groceries and household items. I'm sorry, Vanessa. I should have checked with you directly." The 17-hour return flight from Tokyo gave me ample time to process these developments and formulate a response strategy. Professional success and personal boundaries were colliding in ways I hadn't anticipated when building either aspect of my life. The situation demanded resolution that honored my achievements while maintaining relationships with those I cared about, a delicate balance requiring both firmness and compassion. Upon landing in San Diego, exhausted from travel but steeled with resolve, I decided to address the situation immediately rather than postponing the inevitable confrontation. David met me at the airport, his discomfort evident in his tense posture and apologetic expression. "I really messed up," he said after a brief embrace. "I should have called you before giving him access to your house." "We'll discuss that later," I replied, appreciating his accountability but focused on the immediate task. "Right now, I need to go home and address the situation directly." The drive to my hillside house passed mostly in silence, both of us, contemplating the conversation to come. As we approached the driveway, I noticed unfamiliar cars parked outside, a battered Jeep that presumably belonged to Marcus, and my mother's silver Lexus. "They're both here," David observed unnecessarily. "Do you want me to come in with you?" I considered this briefly before shaking my head. I think this is a conversation I need to have without audience or intermediaries, but thank you for offering. "I'll wait out here in case you need backup," he replied, squeezing my hand supportively. Taking a deep breath, I approached my front ducker, using my key to enter what suddenly felt like someone else's space. The transformation was immediately apparent. Guitar cases leaned against the entryway wall. Unfamiliar shoes were scattered across the floor. The scent of my carefully selected lavender diffuser had been replaced by a mixture of pizza, cologne, and guitar string cleaner. Following voices toward the kitchen, I found Marcus and my mother engaged in casual conversation as they unpacked grocery bags. They looked up in unison as I entered, surprise registering on both faces. "Vanessa," my mother exclaimed, "we weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "Clearly," I replied, taking in the scene. My immaculate kitchen counters were cluttered with takeout containers, music magazines, and coffee mugs. A guitar amplifier sat incongruously beside my professional-grade espresso machine. I caught an earlier flight. Marcus at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Hey, V, welcome back. How was Japan?" "Successful," I answered simply, placing my carry-on bag on a counter stool. "The contract is signed. Now, can someone explain what's happening in my house?" My mother immediately stepped forward, adopting the mediator role she had often assumed during family discussions. "Marcus had an emergency, Vanessa. The Portland position was eliminated due to budget cuts, and he had to vacate his apartment immediately. With your house sitting empty during your trip, it seemed the sensible solution." "A solution implemented without consulting me," I pointed out. "After I'd explicitly stated I wasn't comfortable having Marcus live here." "There wasn't time to consult," she countered. "You were in meetings all day, and the time difference made communication difficult. We had to make a decision quickly, and that decision just happened to align with what you wanted all along," I observed, despite my clear boundaries. "Interesting coincidence." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Look, V, I know this isn't ideal, but Mom said you'd understand once. You got back and we could talk. It's just temporary until I figure out next steps." "And what are those next steps?" I asked directly. "What's your timeline and exit strategy?" The glance exchanged between Marcus and my mother spoke volumes. There was no exit strategy, no concrete plan beyond occupying my space indefinitely while figuring things out. "That's what we need to discuss," my mother interjected smoothly. "Marcus has some promising leads locally. Several venues have expressed interest in booking his band again now that he's back. And there's potential for session work at Riverstone Studios. None of which addresses immediate housing needs," I pointed out. "While I sympathize with your situation, Marcus, this isn't a sustainable solution. I didn't build this house to become a landing pad for family members between opportunities." My mother's expression hardened. "That's remarkably selfish, Vanessa. Would it really hurt you to share your good fortune while your brother gets back? On his feet? This house has 3 bedrooms. You're hardly cramped for space." "This isn't about square footage," I countered. "It's about boundaries and respect for my choices. I've worked incredibly hard to create both this home and my company. Neither happened by accident or good fortune. They represent years of sacrifice and risk that I undertook alone." "We know you've worked hard," my mother said dismissively. "But family supports each other through difficult times. When you needed help after your layoff, Marcus opened his home without hesitation." "For 3 weeks," I specified, "with a clear timeline and exit strategy. I paid rent, contributed to expenses, and actively secured alternative housing. I'm not seeing equivalent effort here." Marcus stepped forward. His expression conflicted. V, I get what you're saying. And I appreciate everything you did to help with the Portland opportunity. I really thought that was going to work out. What exactly happened there? I asked, shifting attention from the emotional appeal to concrete details. Mom mentioned budget cuts, but that seems unlikely just 6 weeks after hiring you. He looked away, discomfort evident. It was more complicated than that. There were some attendance issues. The morning classes started at 7 a.m. and after late gigs. The familiar pattern emerged. Opportunity undermined by inconsistent execution. Passion for music prioritized over employment stability. While I sympathized with Marcus's genuine talent and creative drive, the consequences of his choices couldn't continually become my responsibility. I see, I said simply. Marcus, I want to help you succeed. I truly do. But enabling patterns that lead to predictable outcomes isn't really helping, and sacrificing my personal boundaries won't serve either of us in the long run. My mother's frustration became visible. So, what exactly are you suggesting? That your brother should be homeless while you enjoy your perfect house and successful career? Is that the kind of family support you believe in? Her framing of the situation as a binary choice, either I accommodate Marcus indefinitely or condemn him to homelessness, was both manipulative and false. The reality included numerous alternatives: short-term rentals, shared housing, room rentals, even temporary housing through musicians' networks he'd been part of for years. I'm suggesting we find an appropriate solution that respects everyone's needs, I replied evenly. I'll help financially with a short-term rental while Marcus rebuilds his local connections. I can offer career coaching and networking in the music industry through ClearPath's entertainment clients. What I can't offer is indefinite housing without clear boundaries or timeline. The discussion continued for nearly 2 hours, cycling through emotional appeals, recriminations about family obligation, and occasional productive moments considering realistic alternatives. Throughout, I maintained focus on the fundamental principle: support should empower independence rather than foster dependence. Any solution needed to acknowledge both Marcus's legitimate needs and my right to maintain boundaries around the life I had built. Eventually, we reached an uneasy compromise. I would provide financial assistance for Marcus to secure a studio apartment with a 3-month lease, giving him time to reestablish local income sources. He would vacate my house within 1 week, taking the accumulated possessions that had already migrated into my space. My mother reluctantly accepted this arrangement, though her disapproval remained evident in her tight-lipped farewell as they finally departed. Left alone in my now quiet kitchen, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief at reclaiming my space, guilt over my mother's obvious disappointment, concern for Marcus's sustainable success, and lingering frustration at the violation of my clearly established boundaries. David texted from outside. "Everything okay in there? Need me to come in? Just wrapping up. They're leaving. Could use a hug when you have a moment." He appeared minutes later, concern evident in his expression. "That sounded intense from outside. Are you all right?" "I will be," I replied, accepting his embrace. We reached a workable solution, though not one that made everyone happy. "I'm funding a short-term apartment for Marcus while he rebuilds locally." "That seems more than generous," David observed. "Though I'm guessing your mother didn't see it that way." "No," I confirmed. In her view, anything short of opening my home indefinitely represents selfish withholding of resources. The concept of legitimate personal boundaries within family doesn't seem to register. David's perspective offered valuable balance to the emotion-laden family dynamic. You know, what strikes me about this situation is the asymmetry. Your success is viewed as a family resource, while your boundaries are considered personal selfishness. That's not how healthy relationships work, in families or elsewhere. His observation crystallized something I had felt but struggled to articulate. The expectation that success should be shared while boundaries should be sacrificed created an inherently unbalanced relationship, one that ultimately undermined both parties' growth and independence. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.